Hi there, and welcome back to One Voice, One Night. Tonight, we begin a new journey into soft-lit taverns, moonlit meadows, forgotten legends, and quiet corners of the old world. This is a tale from the edge of history, part memory, part myth. A tale passed down not through books, but through whispers by the fire. So close your eyes, rest your thoughts, and let the candles guide you. They say the world is louder now than it used to be. But there was a time, long ago, before the clocks ticked and the cities buzzed, when stories drifted slower. They curled through the rafters of timbered inns, carried on the smoke of wood fires, and rested gently on the lips of old men with kind eyes and time to spare. It is one of those nights. The fire crackles softly in the hearth. Outside, a light drizzle taps on the thatched roof, rhythmic and patient, the kind of rain that never hurries. A candle burns low in the corner of a worn wooden table, and beside it sits the old man, the storyteller. He's not a wizard, though some children call him that. He's not a bard, though his voice could hush a room without a song. He is simply a collector of moments too small for history and too soft for war. He dips his quill into ink and begins to write in the old leather book before him, not because he wants to remember, but because he doesn't want the world to forget. Tonight, he murmurs, I shall tell you of the lantern girl of Linden Hollow. And just like that, the tale begins. Linden Hollow was a village so small it fit into the fold of a hill, nestled between two sleepy rivers and a thicket of whispering birch trees. No one ever came to Linden Hollow looking for greatness. There were no knights, no towers, no dragons to slay. Just bees in the summer, bread that always tasted like home, and sunrises that blushed like old love letters. But on the coldest night of the year, when the sky turned violet and the snow lay undisturbed, a single lantern would appear, bobbing through the dark like a golden fish in a black sea. The villagers called her the Lantern Girl. She never spoke, never knocked, but wherever her light passed, the sick grew stronger, the hungry slept full, and the restless finally dreamed. Some say she was a spirit born from the prayers of the village. Others believed she was the lost daughter of the moon, but the storyteller knows better. She was real, he says softly, and I met her. Once his eyes gleam in the firelights, not from excitement, but remembrance. He closes the leather book and leans back. The rain is falling harder now, and the candle is nearly out. But the tale has only just begun. The candle on the table finally went out, but the old man did not stir. His voice carried the light now, soft and steady, warming the room more than the fire. I was just a boy, he said, the year the Lantern Girl disappeared. Linden Hollow had always been a place where the seasons took their time. Spring lingered like a lover at the door, and winter stayed long enough to be known by name. The people there believed in weather and bread and each other, not magic. But the Lantern Girl, she was the exception. Every year, on the eve of the frost moon, her light would glide silently through the village. Not a soul saw her arrive, not a soul saw her leave. But the glow of her lantern brushed across door frames like a blessing. Children who had cried in their sleep woke up dry-eyed and rested. Crops that had spoiled suddenly turned sweet. And one year, the year the fever came, her lantern passed over every bed, and not a single soul was lost. She became more than a mystery. She became part of the village. They didn't try to catch her. They didn't ask her name. They just left a bowl of warm soup by the window and whispered thanks into the wind. Until one year, she didn't come. The frost moon rose full and round. The sky was clear. The lantern did not appear. And in that stillness, that aching silence, Linden Hollow began to forget how to sleep. The storyteller's voice dimmed. He reached for his cup of tea, now lukewarm, and sipped it like it was something ancient. The fire let out a sigh. That winter, he said, was longer than any we had ever known. The village changed. People began locking their doors. Children whispered about curses. Old men stared too long into the forest. The baker's daughter stopped singing. The chapel's bells stayed still. Even the river, once bubbling with mischief, froze over in a way that didn't feel quite natural. No one said it aloud, but they all felt it. The village was waiting for something that wasn't coming back. And so it was, on a night like this, with sleet tapping gently at the glass and silence pressed thick against the walls, that the boy, not yet the storyteller, not yet brave, made a decision. He would go and look for her. He didn't tell anyone. He just packed a scarf, a crust of bread, and a little candle of his own. He lit it with trembling hands, stepped out into the dark, and followed where no light had gone before. The wind was different beyond the village. It didn't hum like it did between houses. It whispered in tongues that trees understood. The moon was high, but soft, like it didn't want to disturb the frost lying thick on the ground. Every step the boy took made the snow sigh beneath his boots. He held the candle close. It flickered nervously, as if it too wondered why they had left the warmth of home. There was no map, no trail, only memory of where the lantern girl used to go. He remembered once, years before, watching the light float toward the old birch grove just beyond the hill. She had stopped for a moment beneath the trees, and the snow there had sparkled blue. So he walked, not quickly, not fearfully, but with the steady rhythm of someone following a memory. The birch grove waited like a held breath. Their trunks were pale like bones, their branches stretched high and quiet. But the moment he stepped beneath them, the wind stopped. The candle did not move. There was no snow in the grove, only dry leaves and a smell like old honey. And then a sound, not loud, not sharp. It was the sound of a bell, tiny, faint, as if it had been rung long ago, and only now reached his ears. The boy followed it. He didn't know why, only that his feet wanted to. The bell rang again, once, then silence, and then something strange happened. The candle flame stretched, just a little, not up but forward, toward the heart of the trees, and in the distance, something shimmered. It was not the lantern girl, not yet. It was an old stump, covered in moss, glowing softly from beneath, as if something lived inside. On top of the stump sat a jar, a glass jar sealed with wax, and inside a flame, tiny, floating, alive. The boy reached out, hands trembling. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was hers. "You left this," he whispered, and the flame pulsed once. Not dangerously, not hot, just acknowledgement. He lifted the jar gently, holding it against his chest. The moment his hands touched it, the wind returned, but it didn't bite this time. It danced. The trees above shifted slightly, as if bowing. Something had changed. Not everything, but something. And as he turned to go, the flame in his little candle, the one he had lit with shaking fingers, burned steadier than it ever had before. The boy did not know how long he had been walking. The forest seemed to stretch and fold in strange ways, sometimes thin and brittle like winter lace, other times dense and hushed like a cathedral of trees. But the flame in the jar stayed steady, and so did his steps. It didn't feel like he was lost. It felt like he was being led. Every so often, the flame inside the jar would flicker toward a direction, slightly left, slightly right, like a compass made of warmth. And every time it did, the air would grow a little softer, the path a little clearer. Then, just past a crooked elm with bark like braids, the boy saw it. A cottage. Old, but not broken. Round windows like blinking eyes. A stone chimney curled with ivy. The roof was made of moss and mist, and the door was painted gold. He hadn't expected a home, but this was not the kind of journey where one knows what to expect. He approached slowly. The air smelled like wild thyme and forgotten pages. There was no sign of anyone inside, no sound, no footsteps, but something in the boy's chest told him this was the place. So he placed the jar on the doorstep, carefully, as if waking someone who had been sleeping for centuries. And as he stepped back, the door creaked open. There was no one there. Not at first. Just the scent of rain on warm stone. Then, a light from within the cottage, a faint golden glow emerged. It touched the floor, the walls, the shelves of herbs and papers, and little jars filled with starlight and sleep. And then, a voice. Not a whisper, not thunder, just a gentle voice, like the hush of snow falling on a window pane. You brought it back. The boy turned. There, standing in the doorway, was a figure in a cloak of grey. Her face was mostly shadowed, but her presence was unmistakable. The lantern girl, but older, tired, still luminous. "Why did you stop coming?" the boy asked. Her eyes, gentle and deep as moonlit wells, held his for a long time. Then she stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. "Because I forgot," she said, "that anyone still believed." Inside, time moved differently. The boy sat at a round table carved with runes he didn't understand. The woman placed tea before him. It tasted like warmth and memory. Around them, shelves stretched high and crooked, filled with little orbs of light, each softly pulsing. "These are stories," she said, noticing his stare. "Stories?" he echoed. She nodded. "Everyone I've helped left behind a part of themselves. A memory. A kindness. A truth. I kept them here so they wouldn't vanish. But when the world stopped believing, the stories began to dim." She gestured towards the jar he had carried. "Yours glowed brighter than any I've seen in years." The boy looked down, unsure what to say. But he didn't have to. The woman leaned closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You reminded me that even the smallest light can guide someone home." Outside, the wind had stopped again. Not from fear, but from listening. The cottage was small, but it held more stories than any library. The shelves climbed to the ceiling like ladders of memory, each holding a tiny orb of light, soft and silent. Some pulsed faintly. Others blinked, as if dreaming. A few had grown dim, wrapped in cobwebs, nearly forgotten. The boy stood in awe. "They're not just memories," the woman said, watching him gently. "They're truths." He turned to her, unsure. "Truths?" She smiled, not with her lips, but with her presence. A smile you feel more than see. When someone tells the truth about who they are, even just once in their life, a light is born. "And you keep them here?" he asked. "Not forever," she replied. "Only until someone needs to remember it again." She walked slowly along the shelves, fingers gliding near each orb, but never quite touching. "This one," she murmured, pausing by a deep blue light, "belonged to a midwife who delivered a child in a thunderstorm," even as her own hands shook. "This one," she gestured to a green gold orb, "was a baker who gave his last loaf to a stranger and slept hungry that night. And this," she stopped before a pale flicker, "is from a boy who once lit a candle and stepped into the forest with no promise of return." The boy stared at it. The flame was small, but it didn't waver. "That's mine," he whispered. She nodded. "That's yours. A truth lit not by knowing, but by believing." He didn't know what to say. Not many people are shown the shape of their own bravery. "Why do they grow dim?" he asked, looking around. The lantern girl paused, then reached for a kettle above the hearth. "Because the world teaches us to forget." She poured tea, steam curling like breath. "We are told to hide our fears, to mask our kindness, to doubt our wonder. And so, the lights grow quiet. But they never go out. Not unless we stop remembering." She placed the cup before him again, warm and grounding. "That's why I walked the village, to remind people of their light." The boy was silent, but his silence was full, not empty. After a while, he stood and walked back to his jar, the one he had carried through snow and shadow. Inside, the flame still burned, but now it pulsed in rhythm with his heart. The lantern girl watched him, then spoke, her voice softer than before. "Would you like to see what lies beyond this cottage?" He nodded. "Will it be like the forest?" She smiled. "Number it will be like the parts of the world most have forgotten, that always remember you." She opened the back door, and what lay beyond was not a path, but something deeper. A hush, a glow, a memory not yet lived. The door creaked softly as it opened, but instead of a forest, a path, or a clearing, the boy saw mist, not thick and grey, but gentle and glowing, like moonlight given form. It curled around his feet, reached up as if to greet him, then pulled away just enough to reveal a step. Then another. He turned to the lantern girl. "What is this place?" She tilted her head. "A place that remembers stories before they're told." And with that, she stepped beside him. They walked in silence at first. The mist opened gently before them, revealing fragments of something. Not quite visions, not quite dreams. In one breath, the boy saw a young knight sitting under a tree, holding a sword made of paper. In another, an old woman plucking stars from a vine and placing them in a basket woven of her own hair. Further still, a fox wearing spectacles, reading aloud to a crowd of mushrooms. "Are these real?" the boy asked. "They're truths," she answered. "Same as yours. Same as mine. Some are old, some haven't happened yet. But they live here, waiting. Waiting for what? A voice." They came to a clearing. At the centre stood a well, not deep, but impossibly still. Its water reflected only what lived inside the heart, not the sky. The lantern girl approached it and knelt. "This is where I come to remember," she said. She motioned to the boy. "Look." He leaned over. The water shimmered and showed him a village. Not Linden Hollow, not quite. It was similar, but warmer, brighter. Children laughed barefoot through puddles. Lanterns floated in the sky, not just one, but hundreds. And walking among them was him. Older, wiser, carrying a lantern of his own. "I don't understand," he said. She looked at him with eyes full of time. "You were never just a seeker," she whispered. You're a bearer now. A bearer of light, of truth, of memory. She placed a hand over his heart. You brought something here that most forget. The courage to care. The well rippled, and with it, something inside the boy did too. He didn't feel bigger or braver. He simply felt rooted, as if his story was not just his own anymore. The mist began to shift again. This time it parted not as invitation, but as farewell. The boy turned. Is it time to go? The lantern girl smiled. No one ever truly leaves here. You'll carry it with you now. She reached into her cloak and pulled out something wrapped in velvet. Inside, a lantern. Not hers. His. Small, quiet, but unmistakably alive. Yours will light what mine no longer can. The boy took it, hand steady. And as he stepped back toward the edge of the mist, it followed him. Not clinging, not resisting, just watching. Because the land that listens had heard. The path back was different, not shorter, not clearer, but softer somehow, as if the trees themselves recognized him now. The mist had lifted, and with it, the weight of something unnamed. The boy walked quietly, lantern in hand, its golden light casting long, thoughtful shadows. When he reached the edge of the forest, Linden Hollow was asleep. The windows were dark. The wind had gone still. Even the snow seemed to hold its breath. He paused on the hill overlooking the village, the same place he had once watched the lantern girl disappear into the night. Now, it was his turn. He stepped into the village. Not like a hero, not like a ghost, just a boy with a lantern, walking where silence had grown too loud. He passed the blacksmith's door. The horses inside stirred gently. He passed the baker's shop. A candle flickered to life behind the shutters. He passed the chapel. The bell, untouched, gave a faint chime, provoked but not unwelcome. Wherever his light touched, something woke. Not with noise, not with words. Just breathe. He stopped outside the home of the eldest villager, a woman whose memory had long since faded. He placed the lantern gently on her windowsill. Inside, the woman stirred for the first time in weeks. She whispered a name, no one knew whose, and smiled in her sleep. One by one, the boy visited each doorstep. He did not knock. He did not call. He simply let the light be seen. The lantern glowed not brighter, but deeper, like it understood each heart it passed. And when the last path was walked, and the final house reached, the boy returned to the middle of the village, the square with the old fountain dry for years. He placed the lantern on its stone edge. Then he sat, and he waited. Not for thanks, not for answers, just to be. Dawn came slowly. The first light of morning met the glow of the lantern, like two old friends nodding to each other. Doors opened. Faces peeked out. No one said anything at first, but one by one, the villagers emerged, slippers on snow, breath in clouds, eyes wide not with fear, but memory. And then, a child, small, no older than he had been, stepped forward and said, "She came back." The boy looked up. "No," he said, voice quiet. "You did." They didn't know what to do with the truth, so they did what their hearts remembered. The baker lit his oven. The smith opened his shop. And someone, no one remembers who, rang the chapel bell 3 times. Not out of ritual, but welcome. That night, the village didn't speak of miracles. They shared soup. They told stories. They looked each other in the eyes a little longer than usual. And when the boy returned home, The lantern was already waiting for him by the window. The days that followed were quiet, but not the kind of silence the village had grown used to. This was a different kind. The kind that came before music, before birdsong, before something bloomed. The boy, now known simply as the one who brought the light back, did not speak of his journey. No one asked. Not because they weren't curious, but because somehow they already knew. Instead, they showed him what had changed. The baker, whose hands had once trembled from age, found his fingers strong again. His loaves came out rounder, softer. He swore he did nothing different. The river, which had frozen early and deep, began to thaw, not with the season, but with the sound of children skipping stones again. And in the grove where the birch trees met the hill, small lanterns began appearing at night, not hung by hands, but grown from branches, like glowing fruit. The villagers stopped calling it magic. They called it remembering. One evening the boy wandered to the old well in the centre of the village. He hadn't looked into it since before the frost moon, but now, as he peered in, he saw something unexpected. Not his reflection, but a memory, one that wasn't his alone. The lantern girl, walking the village, pausing by each home, leaving behind a whisper of warmth, then a flicker. She turned, looking directly toward him, not as a vision, but as if she saw him now even from far away. And she smiled. He sat by the well, watching the stars appear. One by one, they blinked into the night sky. Not hurried, not shy, just present. And as he leaned back, something tugged at his sleeve. A girl, younger than him, eyes wide, holding a stubby little candle with both hands. "Can you teach me?" she asked. He blinked. "Teach you what?" She shrugged, as children do when they mean everything and nothing all at once. "How to carry light," he smiled. Not big, just enough. And he nodded. "First," he said, "you have to believe it belongs to you." That night, more children came. No one told them to. They brought candles, jars, scraps of ribbon, old matches, bits of cloth soaked in oil. The boy, not so much older than them, showed them how to light gently, to hold carefully, to walk slowly. They practiced. Some flames blew out, some flickered wildly, but no one was scolded. And for the first time in years, Linden Hollow glowed from within, not from the return of one light, but from the rising of many. Spring came early that year, not with trumpet blasts or sudden bloom, but with gentleness. The snow melted slowly, like it knew it was time. Crocuses pushed through the softened ground. The birds came back without ceremony, singing like they'd never left, and the village listened, more than they used to. Stories began returning too. Not the kind in books, the kind people had stopped telling out loud. About the old woodcutter who once saw a fox bow to the moon. About the girl who could speak to wind if she listened with her eyes closed. About the twins who got lost in the fog and returned knowing how to play the harp without ever being taught. They weren't told to impress. They were told to remember. Even the quietest elders began to speak again. Not of facts, but of feeling. One old man, who hadn't spoken more than 5 words in 5 winters, whispered, "She lit my window when my wife passed. I thought I dreamed it." And someone else replied, "Maybe you did. That doesn't mean it wasn't real." One evening the children asked the boy to tell his story. He hesitated. He wasn't sure he could. But the lantern beside him flickered, not impatiently, just warmly. so he nodded. They sat in a circle, some cross-legged, some curled up with blankets, some too young to understand, some old enough to cry quietly, and he told it. Not all of it, not in order, but in the way stories are meant to be told, with pauses where the truth lives. When he finished, the smallest child, the one who first asked how to carry light, said, "So the forest listened to you?" He looked up at the stars. "I think," he said slowly, "I finally listened to it." That night, as the fire crackled low and the sky turned a deep, healing blue, someone whispered what the village had not dared say in years. "Do you think she'll come again?" And the boy, no longer quite a boy, answered simply, "She already has." They looked around, at the candles, at each other, at the light that had no single source, and they understood. Time passed, not in leaps, but in lantern-lit steps. The boy grew, not tall overnight, not into a hero sung in ballads, but into someone people trusted without needing a reason. He stayed in Linden Hollow. He didn't build a castle. He built shelves, like the ones in the Lantern Girl's cottage. But instead of glowing orbs, they held drawings, notes, jars of pressed herbs, and feathers and tiny figurines carved from wood. Each one a memory, gifted to him by someone who had remembered a piece of themselves. And the children kept coming, to light their first flame, to whisper a story into a jar, to sit quietly and know they were seen. The Lantern Girl was never seen again. Not in the way before, but sometimes, when the wind moved strangely through the birch trees, or when a lantern in the grove glowed without anyone touching it, the villagers would smile, and they would say, "She never left. She just passed the light on." The boy, now a man, though he never stopped feeling like the boy with the jar, never tried to explain what happened that winter. He let the story tell itself, over time, in bits and echoes and shared silence. One night, many years later, when his hair had begun to silver and his hands bore the kindness of time, he sat by the same well where once he had seen his future. He placed a lantern on its edge. Inside, a flame. Not his, a new one, lit by someone else, carried by someone younger. And he whispered, "Carry it forward. Light only fades when we forget how to share it." That night, as the rain gently tapped on rooftops and dreams stirred beneath warm blankets, Linden Hollow slept in peace. The village no longer needed to wait for a miracle. It had become one, not because of magic, but because one boy once walked into the forest with nothing but a candle and believed it was enough.